David was a young man from a small town in the United States, where poverty was a constant shadow that followed him throughout his life. Born to a family with little to their name, David was treated as an outsider by the people in his community. He was often mocked, belittled, and made to feel inferior simply because he didn't have the material wealth that others flaunted. The sting of this exclusion drove him to a point where he felt desperate for change. He was tired of being the subject of ridicule, tired of being looked down upon. In his search for a way out, David heard whispers about a mysterious ritual, a dark, ancient deal that promised wealth in exchange for suffering. Desperate for a better life, he sought out the source of these rumors. What he found was a powerful figure, an enigmatic spiritual leader who promised David that if he completed a task, riches would flow into his life. The task, however, was not simple. He was told that he would have to run mad for 7 years, enduring the torment and insanity of it all. After 7 years of madness, the riches would be his. The thought of riches was intoxicating, and though David was terrified, the promise of escaping his miserable life clouded his judgment. The ritual began, and for the next several years, David lost his sense of self. The pain, the madness, and the suffering took hold of him. Each day was more excruciating than the last. His life became a blur of hallucinations, confusion, and torment. The people who once scorned him now watched from a distance, some curious, others mocking his apparent insanity. But David was determined. He convinced himself that he had only a few more days to go before the riches would be his. 3 days left. Just 3 days, and his misery would be over. As he wandered the streets of his town, barely able to recognize reality, David found himself in the darkest corner of the town, the alley where trash and refuse were tossed without care. His mind was barely intact, but his will was strong. He clung to the belief that in just 3 days, his riches would arrive. That was when the Reverend Father, a spiritual man known for his deep connection with God, was passing by. The priest had been on his way home from a long day of prayer and ministry, when he spotted David lying in the dustbin, his body broken and his mind shattered. The Reverend Father's heart sank as he approached David. He recognized the young man's suffering, and in his compassionate nature, he couldn't leave him there. Gently, he knelt beside David, trying to rouse him from his delirium. David, in his confusion, lashed out, fighting the priest as though he were an enemy. "No! Don't touch me!" he screamed, his voice cracking. "Only 3 days left. I can't stop now. My wealth is almost here." The Reverend Father was taken aback but remained calm. "My child, you are deceived," he said softly, his voice full of sorrow. "This path you are on will not lead to what you seek. The riches you have been promised come at a great cost. The devil who promised you these things seeks only to destroy you." David's eyes flashed with anger. "What do you know? You don't understand. I'm so close, so close." His hands shook as he clutched his head, torn between his belief in the ritual and the priest's words. The Reverend Father prayed over him, his voice a steady, soothing cadence of faith. As he spoke, the madness seemed to subside just a little. David's body trembled, but for the first time in years, he felt a flicker of clarity. The priest continued, "I know you've suffered. But Jesus Christ offers you a wealth that does not come with sorrow, a life full of peace and fulfillment. You have been promised riches, but at what cost? The devil wants your life 3 months after he gives you what he's promised. You'll never know joy, only a hollow existence." David stared at the priest, the words sinking into his fractured mind. Could it be true? Had he been so blind to the true cost of his bargain? The priest placed his hands on David's head, his prayer growing stronger. "Come to Jesus, my child. Accept him, and he will give you riches that do not come with death, that do not come with destruction." The words were like a balm to David's wounded soul. For the first time in years, he felt a glimmer of hope. The priest's words echoed in his heart, and he began to cry, not from madness or despair, but from the realization that he had been on the wrong path all along. The Reverend Father promised David that with faith in Christ, he would be transformed. "You will find the true wealth in your heart, in your connection with God," the priest assured him. "The wealth of this world is fleeting, but the riches of Christ will last forever." David's life began to change that very day. With the help of the Reverend Father, he was slowly freed from the madness that had gripped him for so long. As he embraced the teachings of Jesus, he found a new purpose, a new sense of peace. The riches that had once seemed so important to him no longer held the same allure. He realized that the true wealth was in love, in faith, and in living a life full of integrity and purpose. As David's life began to improve, so did his standing in the community. The people who had once mocked him now saw a different man, a man transformed by faith and grace. His story of redemption spread like wildfire, and soon, others from his town came seeking the same path to healing and wealth. They asked him for the secret to his newfound prosperity, but David only had one answer: Jesus Christ. David's faith, his strength, and his unwavering belief in the goodness of God led him to a place of true wealth, wealth that could never be taken away. His community, once filled with scorn, now revered him as a leader, a man whose life had been touched by the divine. And as David helped others find their way to Christ, he realized that the true riches of life weren't material, they were spiritual, and they were far greater than any treasure the world could offer. In the end, David had found the riches he had always sought, but they were not the riches he had once imagined. They were the riches of peace, of love, and of a life devoted to Christ. And in that wealth, he found the freedom he had always dreamed of, freedom from the chains of poverty, the chains of madness, and the chains of the world's empty promises.